From Vietnam, we took a red-eye flight to Seoul, South Korea. Our hotel was in the Insadong neighborhood, right off the main walking street. Quiet during the mornings, it picked up later in the day and well into the night. There were lots of side streets in the area with shops and bars and restaurants, many with traditional architecture and decor. The area is very walkable in general, and just south of us, Cheong Chik Chong is a popular pedestrian park built around a beautiful stream. There were many nearby options for going around Seoul. The metro system covers most of the sprawling city. Stations and trains are clean and orderly, with some of the most useful displays we've ever seen. They also take safety very seriously, with instructional videos playing on many trains. The bus network is also extensive and complements the metro. A preloaded RFID card we bought at the airport can be used on both systems, and it's valid nationwide. There is a nearby supermarket, but the large neighborhood markets are the best places to go. Gwangjang Market was the closest, a long walk or short bus ride away. We were in a small hotel room, so take-home food wasn't for us. But the food stalls were fantastic. One was featured on Netflix, another on a local show. We just picked a random stall with no queue, and the food was delicious. A bit farther away, Myeongdong Night Market is even more touristy than Gwangjang, and primarily street food, with no sit-down food stalls. There was a lot of variety, and delicious, though not very healthy or cheap. But it's a Seoul experience not to be missed. Even farther south, Namdaemun Market is the oldest in Korea, dating back 600 years to 1414. It's also the largest, with over 300,000 square feet of shops. Seoul has several nice parks, Namsan Mountain being the most famous and prominent park, with the iconic Seoul Tower. You can either climb up nearly 900 feet of steps or take a cable car, which is what Avic opted for. Though with the long lines to get onto the cable car, I got to the top first, even with plenty of stops to take in the scenery. The top is a popular place for families and crazy popular for leaving love locks. The massive Seoul Tower is only 100 feet shorter than the mountain itself. But even without paying to ride to the top, the views of the city are pretty spectacular. The Han River runs through the middle of Seoul, and for centuries was the city's lifeblood, as it was a major trade route to China through the Yellow Sea. But since the Korean Armistice of 1953, the mouth straddles the north-south border, halting all river trade. It's still very important, as it provides water to a quarter of all South Koreans. Many Seoul parks are along the river, and we visited one during a festival. There was a lot of food being served up, and the jet ski rides looked almost as much fun to watch as they did to take. Another park in southeast Seoul was a metro ride south of the Han. A beautiful tree-lined lake with a popular walking path. Sokchon Lake is an urban example of the Korean tradition of Sannam-yok, or forest bathing. Maybe better known as Shinrin-yoku in Japan, The tradition is alive and well in Seoul. There's even a national forest bathing center focused on nature-based wellness. Adjacent to the lake park, Lotte World Adventure Park and Hotel is an unusual place. And it contains an unusually good private museum. Starting with Neolithic prehistory, its models, displays, and maps cover the entire Korean peninsula. From the 4th century introduction of Buddhism from China during the Goryeo, Baekje, and Silla Three Kingdoms period, to Silla uniting most of the peninsula, followed by Goryeo, from which the peninsula derives its name, and finally to Joseon, which will be most familiar to fans of period Korean dramas. We picked our hotel location because it's near the heart of Joseon, Seoul. The first Joseon king built Gyeongbok Palace in 1395, and it's still very much inside the city. Like palace architecture that we saw in Vietnam, Gyeongbok was heavily influenced by neighboring China, though the colors here are much more varied and vibrant. The palace as it stands today was mostly reconstructed in the 1990s, as the vast majority was destroyed by the Japanese during their early 20th century occupation. The Joseon predecessor, Goryeo, was a vassal of the Mongol-Yuan Chinese dynasty, and the peninsula was a launching base for two 13th century invasions of Japan. Japan made two later attempts to conquer Korea as a base for invading China. They finally succeeded in the 20th century. Changdok Palace to the east was built by the third Joseon king just 10 years after Gyeongbok, because he committed mass fratricide in Gyeongbok to take the throne. Now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's considered the most beautiful of the Joseon palaces, particularly for its gardens, including the secret garden that was the exclusive domain of the royal family. Like Gyeongbok Palace, it was destroyed by the Japanese and only recently rebuilt. The fourth king of Joseon, Sejong the Great, was a reformer and patron of science and technology. His greatest legacy is the invention and promulgation of Hangul, the Korean written language. Like in Vietnam, for centuries only elites were able to write in Chinese characters. The greatly simplified 28-character phonetic language brought literacy to the Korean masses. Between the palaces, Bukchon Hanok village was built about 600 years ago to house functionaries, officials, and others who had to be close to the palaces. It was largely left alone by the Japanese, and one beautiful house in particular was built during the Japanese era by a wealthy banker and is now a museum. But much of the village was severely damaged by indiscriminate modernization during the early days of South Korea's economic boom in the 1980s and 90s. More recently, focus was placed on preserving the village. The palaces and village have become tourist hotspots, with mass interest in traditional Korean culture. Hanbok, clothing dating back to the Three Kingdoms period, is popular to rent and grants free entrance to most of the palaces. The flip side of this tourism is conflict with the village's residents. There are now strict visiting times and days and expected behavior that seek to achieve harmonious coexistence. We wanted to have the Hanbok experience too, so we picked a rental shop near the Cheongdok Palace, and soon we were on our way. Period costumes were nothing new to us, but wearing them in an actual historical palace was new, and it was awesome. We were also in search of spring cherry blossoms. rows and rows of them that we'd seen in internet photos. But everywhere we went, they were stripped mostly or completely bare by a storm that had come through a day before our arrival. Cheongdeok Palace was supposed to be one of the best places, so we were hopeful that our search would be fruitful here. We arrived at Chungdanji Pond inside Cheongdeok Palace, and while most trees were bare, with blossoms fallen into the water or onto the ground, what was there was absolutely beautiful.